Okay, but
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I hope everyone had a good lunch break. Right now, we are going to kick off with our third high-level plenary on accessing water and the gender balance. With that, this will go from 2:30 till 4 o'clock, and then we'll have another 30-minute break. And with that, I'm going to turn us over to Prowse, who will
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to all of you. I know it's always the first session in the afternoon, but we will do our best here on the panel to keep us all very active. Distinguished guests and colleagues, it is really an honor and privilege for me to moderate this session entitled Accessing Water and the Gender Balance. I do this in my capacity as chair of the Global Water Partnership. Let me give you some information on Global Water Partnership. The vision of GWP is a water-secure world. We are a global network spanning more than 3,000 partner organizations in over 170 countries. GWP is a partnership for sustainable development, active since 1996, established specifically as an outcome of the original Rio Conference. WMO is a sponsoring partner of GWP, and GWP is an active partner with the WMO for our joint work in flood and drought management. On a personal and professional level, I have been very engaged on women's issues, serving as Vice President of the UN Women National Committee of Germany. I have been actively involved in institutional issues of gender and women's empowerment during my assignment as Vice President of the Asian Development Bank in Manila. And I have championed the need to mainstream gender into water resources management across the GWP network. The GWP network has always had inclusiveness and gender sensitivity as core values, and I am pleased to say that our new 2014 to 2019 GWP strategy towards 2020 has built upon this, adopting gender as a cross-cutting strategic issue. Let me now come to this high-level plenary, which will be the role and contribution of women in providing weather and climate services for water resources management. People need fresh water to survive. There is no substitute for it. We use it to create the goods and services that form our global economy. The availability of and access to water is greatly impacted by weather and climate. In fact, this is how most people first will experience climate change. Weather and climate information are thus fundamental to improve the water resources management. Women's participation in water management empowers women, but also contributes to more effective and appropriate water management. Women's voices are urgently needed in all aspects of water resources management, from the monitoring of the resource through the operation of water supply systems to the collection and including the delivery of water into households, farm fields, and industry. It is for this reason that GWP has begun a partnership with the International Water Centre in Australia to promote women leadership in water management by offering a scholarship for women in developing countries to obtain their masters in integrated water resource management. We know that improved access to weather and climate information will greatly assist in more sustainable management of our precious water resources. But can this also help in addressing the gender balance and improving the role played by women in the water sector? With the help of the panelists and you in the audience, we will ponder these issues over the next 90 minutes. Let me now introduce the panel to you. I have engineer Mona Faki to my right. Mona is a civil engineer by education, having studied integrated water resource management in different universities around the world. She is currently the director of water at the Lebanese Ministry of Energy and Water and has worked as instructor in hydraulics and dams at the Beirut Arab University and as a consultant engineer. We are really happy that you have come to us in these very complicated times. Then, to my left, Dr. Linda Makuleni. Linda holds a master's in business administration from the Gordon Institute of Business Science in South Africa, a bachelor of veterinary medicine and surgery from the Medical University of Southern Africa, as well as other qualifications. She currently serves as the Chief Executive Officer of the South African Weather Service, a position she has held for the past 8 years. She is also a member from the WMO Executive Council, and she has told me that she was born in the city where I have just been, and a few others here as well, East London in South Africa, attending the big conference from MCO and other organizations on gender, water, and development. So, well, it's a small world. Then we have Ms. Jyoti Sanghera. Jyoti has a PhD from the University of California, Berkeley, and an MA in Women and International Development from the ISS of The Hague, the Netherlands. She is the chief of section of Human Rights and Social Economic Issues at the United Nations Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights in Geneva. She has previously served as head of office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights in Nepal and also as the senior human rights advisor in Sri Lanka. Jyoti has worked on human rights protection issues of women and migrants and other discriminated groups in conflict and post-conflict situations for the past 3 decades in various capacities, including with key NGOs in Northern Africa and Asia, Northern America and Asia, sorry. There is Dr. Alice Aureli. Alice has a PhD in hydrogeology and has worked in the UNESCO Water Sciences Division since 1989. As Chief of Section Groundwater Systems and Settlements, she is responsible for the International Shared Aquifers Resource Management Program. This role has led her to supervise the work of the interdisciplinary group that advised the UN International Law Commission to prepare the draft articles on the law of transboundary aquifers. An important aspect of her work has been on scientific and policy-related issues surrounding groundwater governance, which is also very important for GWP. Alice is the author of numerous publications and has also served as editor of various international journals. So you can see we have a mix of backgrounds and experience, just what we need to discuss this important topic. I would now like to pose a question to each of the panelists to start, and then we will have a discussion among the panelists, and then after that open it up for questions and comments from the auditorium. Mona, to start with you. It is well recognized that in many places fewer women participate in water users associations and local water planning and management. What can we do to empower women and to ensure their more active inclusion in such bodies so that the demand side is really understood, thus ensuring that climate services are truly co-produced? It's now up to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mona Faki. I work as Director of Water in the Ministry of Energy and Water. Actually, I want to talk about my experience. Perhaps if I started from the beginning of my education, to see sometimes the gender issue is included by intuition. What I mean, since I was a child, my father was considering the girl and boy the same, and they must have the same level of education. And he encouraged both of us. He doesn't say that the women are better than the men, or say the men are better than the woman, which is the ideal case, so that the girl and the boy understand that both of them would cooperate to have a holistic approach about everything, if it is related to water or other things in life. Other things that it happened, that when I graduated in the university, usually in the university, when you are graduated in good mark, they give you the opportunity to be an instructor. So there was a debate, because when I graduated, I was 21 years old. And I must be an instructor of hydraulics. It happened that I dealt with water, even because the civil engineer is wide. So there was a debate if I am a woman is capable of teaching the students, especially the young men, because usually the men would consider that the lady is not capable of teaching. So because the dean of the university was in close approach to me, he knows my personality and know how I communicate with people, because it's not only that you are a good engineer. The women usually have good approach to people in general, for men, for the child, because the woman usually is a project of a mother in the future. So her emotions, her honesty, her transparency would help her in playing a role that the man can't play. Her role is complementary. So the gender is how both of them cooperate for the best performance of any work must be done. Every one of them has a vision, has a hope about whatever they are implementing. Both of them will be complementary, like when you make a family. The father and the mother both are needed to build good generation. So later perhaps I would take a long of time, because my experience would lead that the gender is very important in any work, not related only to water. Later, I worked in the Ministry of Energy and Water as a civil engineer. I started by the supervision of the project. While I was going to the site, I was listening especially to the women who were very interested of what we were working and implementing. And I was listening to a very old lady saying, if I would be a minister, I would do this and this. If I would, so the women, even if they're not educated, their hopes is very big, but the situation is not helping them. Another thing that helped me, that the general director was also gender sensitive without knowing, because he was encouraging the woman and she is honest, she is not corrupted, she wants the work to be done well. The other side about the technical, from my experience, because I participated in the strategies and policies regarding the water management in Lebanon, my approach to the service, the weather and climate services, it was very unsuccessful thing, because for the planning, we need good, reliable data, and the weather and the climate is a very important element in the planning. So I discovered there is no woman in the service. This was a part of the unreliability, because when I tried to take the data and put it in a model, I discovered it contains a lot of anomalies. I was thinking, since the woman has a very sensitivity towards the climate and weather, since she is in her home, this element is very important to her, because she cares about the quantity of water, about the quality of water, about the climate changes which would affect the water resources. So actually the recommendation, from my experience, it would be at different levels of women. At the lower level, if she is a farmer, we would educate her at her level of understanding in a certain tool or approach, something that would help her to be a water manager at her level of understanding. The second level, which would be the technical, could encourage women, because in the climate, weather and the climate, I think the women are not interested. The number of the women that care about the weather and the climate, you find it not, they go to other domains. So we could encourage the women to go for the studies about the water in different subjects regarding the weather, climate, managing, environment, water quality, to let her role be in every domain, so that we would have an approach to the best ideal integrated water resources management. So if for the level of at the level of the poor or rich, perhaps would encourage to have a low fees for her studies at university, to encourage her that this is very important to a domain that she would play a role for the best of water management. The highest level is for the policymaker, which I think is difficult in most of all the countries, because when it approached to the level of member of the parliament or the ministers, you would find the percentage of women very low. For example, in Lebanon, there is a committee from the member of the parliaments which care about studying all the things related to water. I didn't find, because there is women in the parliament, but I didn't find in this committee the role of any woman in this committee. So I addressed my message to the parliament, because in my work we have approached to different level of people, the politicians, ministers, because they deal with our ministry and ask for the information about the projects and want their own even projects in their region. So I keep addressing that why this committee, I was telling them that the woman has perhaps a different opinion, would integrate your ideas and perhaps would give you more things that you didn't see yet and would be complementary for what you are planning as a policy maker. I would also address the international organization while funding the projects. Perhaps they would integrate in their terms of reference for the granted projects from their side. They guarantee that this project in any country has a gender sensitivity and would be managed by both men and women. The other thing, how you are talking about improving the position of women and let her, give her opportunity as a technical person in all levels to at least to see that the woman exists. The other part, we must work on the men. Educate men, make training programs for both men and women to let them understand how their role are integrated for the best performance of any project. Make approach, and perhaps the man would understand why the woman must exist in any projects, not for that he is not reliable, just to convince him that she would provide ideas that he needed for the project. Thank you. Perhaps I took a lot of time, but I have a lot to say, but I don't want to take time from all my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this interesting perspective, differentiated approach, but really focusing on men and women at the same time. I think that message came across quite clear also, that one has really to differentiate in between the various levels of where you are working, also related to the education of the people. Thanks for that. Let me now turn to Linda and ask her as a starting point, how can we make climate services an area where women are empowered to help us plan a more sustainable future, because mostly this is not so. So, Linda, it's up to you.
Thank you very much, my chairperson. I think it's important when I start this discussion to remind us about yesterday's discussions, where we all agree in a way that gender balance is an issue. It's an economic issue, it's a social issue, it's a human rights issue, it's a survival issue. And I think when you look at water resource management, it's also an area that is very important. And I think when we talk about sustainable development, we need to remember that development, definition for that is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generation to meet their own needs. So it's also important then, when we talk about women empowerment, to remember the principles of the UN Women Global Compact. Yesterday we talked about issues of the leadership that promotes gender equality. And I think when we talked about the frameworks, we've talked about at an international level, at a regional level, at a national level, and at a community level, that we do have a number of leaders that we can work with to ensure that we build and empower women. And I think it's important then currently to accept that water and climate affect all facets of life. So does water resources. So as we look at women to empower them, I think one of the things that is important that we need to look at, we need not have one blanket when we are dealing with women. We actually need to also segment them. In segmenting them, we will be in a position to understand their different needs. And I think it's a challenge for the national med services that are providing weather and climate services. But it's also a challenge for the other institutions that are providing climate information. And I think when we look at women at those different levels, for me, there's been a lot of different initiatives that are happening that we just need to start integrating. When we talk about women and segmentation, you can start at a level of the political decision-making. We also need to empower those that are making those decisions at that level to understand climate and weather and those services and how they can be provided. For example, you were in the Eastern Cape, my home East London, where the conference was organized by a Water Research Council together with the African Ministers' Council of Water. And the WMO has also, together with the AU, established also an African Ministers' AMCOMET, a council of ministers responsible for MET. Then the question is, we've got that platform of leaders that are there. Do we then have information and knowledge that is tailor-made to address their needs in terms of policy decisions that they need to make at a political level? Do we have necessary weather and climate service and the information or the intelligence that is necessary for them to influence the finance ministers that are responsible for the financials, for providing the funding necessary to provide these services? I think those are questions that we need to ask ourselves as we try to empower at that level. Then moving to the level at an international level, I think we talked about a number of frameworks, but I will also be failing the global framework for climate services if I also do not mention that platform. If you look at the global framework for climate services, and with its 5 components, and if you look at component number 1, talking about interface platform, where you're going to be looking at relevant needs of the different stakeholders. We have launched that, the Global Framework for Climate Services, but I think it's important then at a regional level and also at a national level, as we develop our national framework for climate services, to say upfront, what is the agenda that is going to be addressing issues of women, and how can we empower them at all the different levels? And I think when you talk about the empowerment principles for women, one of the other areas is in equal opportunities. So when we do that interface platform, and we're dealing with water, climate, and weather services, how do we define at that level, when we look at their needs, how do we define how we can empower them in the provision of the weather and climate information? By the way, it's not only the scientist that needs the information, it's also the rural community. But when we talk also, we tend to forget that when we talk about water resources, talking about weather and climate, that is also money. So there is economy in that. How do we then empower women who want to be entrepreneurs in that area? What is it that we need to bring to the table as the providers of these services? And I think that's the question that we need to ask ourselves, to say over the value chain, how do we do that? So I think the platform where you, at a national level, you use that platform when we develop our own national framework for climate services. We also include committees that will look at those issues for the youth. And then the other area with the user interface and capacity development is the issue of youth. Looking at specifically youth, I think we had discussion this morning around health. And also yesterday we had discussions around young girls that battle when it comes to mathematics. And I think in terms of the science and research work that has been done, is that women that are pregnant, that have got iron deficiency, their kids tend to have a lower IQ. So how do you start before the girl child is born to capacitate them? So it's nice we had those discussions. But after that, when they get to school, how do you make them smarter? Science, maths is very important. And I find that, for example, at home, we had a bursary scheme to empower scientists in this field. But we had a challenge of getting students to have this bursary because they didn't have mathematics. How do we influence the agenda, the curriculum at a primary level, high school level, up to the university level? It's important for us when we develop this. And also when we look at capacity building, how do we build institutions that will help us to address that? And when we're dealing with weather and women, you also have a value chain in terms of water resource management. How do you, as look at actually having to have programs that, like leadership programs, have technical programs, like fellowship programs, to empower also the ladies. Then moving to the lower level, where you are running organization. I'll use an example of the weather service. We have identified in South Africa that we do have a challenge in terms of having the necessary expertise in hydromet, in agromet, and also general atmospheric science. Approaching the government, coming up with a program with the Department of Higher Education to say, this is what is needed for the country. Sitting down with the disaster management centers, with the local government to say, what is it that you require? And in that, make a conscious decision, saying that as we get the funds will be divided 50-50. We really want to have 50% of those that are going to be benefiting becoming women. So I think those are some of the issues that are important. The other area that we tend not to also look at when we look at climate is the indigenous knowledge. And I think we underestimate the power that is there in terms of the information. And as scientists, it's one of the areas that I've learned that when you introduce something new, let's say to rural women or people who are illiterate, even if it's urban areas, you start from the known to move to the unknown. So the indigenous knowledge is required. Chairperson, I can actually go on, and maybe I should stop to allow other members.
Thank you very much, Linda. You have really, in a way, also continued what Mona has started, that we have really a multifaceted, very complex issue to look into when we look into climate services and the combination of water resource management, how to then get the gender dimension appropriately being included from the very outset of any ideas, reflections, and recommendations how to move on, not to forget about the youth and what you said at the end, also in indigenous knowledge, which I think is so important and has been neglected very much in many of these discussions we have had. I'm sure we can continue on that later. So let me now turn to Alice, and I would want to ask her to provide us with her experience as a background some information on the status, and this has been discussed already here in the other fora as well, of the sex disaggregated data in the areas of supporting research, in particular meteorological services, climate change related issues, and also related to water. I think this is really a very broad area, and you can give us some more insights. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ursula. Okay, let me say immediately, we need money. We need a lot of money. There are not enough money for that. And unfortunately, the PDGs and the Director Generals of the main money providers are not women. Not yet. Why I say that? Because, in fact, UNESCO, together with the UN World Water Assessment Program, our program, has conducted a real in-depth study evaluating what is around, what exists on sex disaggregated data related to water resources, and climate. And the results is a very, let's say, encouraging, because there is nothing. So there is a lot to do, very much need for us here together in order to put the agenda and start working. The situation, as has been discussed already, is very poor. We have very little information and indicators. So something has to be done. And in the World Water Assessment Program, in UNESCO, the International Hydrological Program, I don't know if you know that together with the colleague of the World Meteorological Organization, the International Hydrological Program, that is a UN program fully devoted to water resources and the science of water hydrology, is fully intergovernmental, like here in WMO, and we work very much together. So we work with the government. And we have started a program, a project on gender disaggregated indicators. So you have some of the little flyers that give you some information about it. The difficulty is definitely to also find the right indicators. The right indicators related to water services, climate services, and have practical guidelines. So we have just started this year, and we are supported by a large group of experts from many countries, a little bit everywhere in the world, associations, and GWP, for example, is also involved. We are working very closely with GWP, Ursula knows that, and we are now looking at how to create this momentum, to have guidelines, to find 4 or 5 indicators that are really high priority to give us an idea of gender sensitivity in water resources. These then will allow us to do training. UNESCO, as you know, is a multidisciplinary capacity with having science, education, communication, and culture, and social science all together in the organization. This allows us to have really a multidisciplinary approach to water resource management, so not only pure science, but also water for culture, water for education and water, gender and water, the program we have. You have heard about it yesterday. And definitely a series of training modules are also considered to be prepared very soon. Having said that, we have already started some pilot. As Ursula said at the very beginning, I'm one of the few experts in hydrogeology who is working on transboundary aquifers. And if there is some information about river basin organization, management, and participation, definitely it's much difficult to find examples of management of aquifers, groundwater resources, transboundary aquifers, gender-sensitive information, data, disaggregated data don't exist. So thanks to the support of a donor, this is why I'm saying we need funds, the Swiss Development Cooperation Agency, together with the UN World Water Assessment Program, South Africa, Botswana, and Namibia, we have started the study of the Stampriet Aquifer with, from the very beginning, this year, a clear focus on how we could collect gender disaggregated data in this particular sphere of water studies, so groundwater. That means that we have started, there was a workshop just 2 weeks ago in Pretoria. So we thank very much the Ministry of Water Resources and the Water Resource Center there that hosted the meeting. Botswana and Namibia were there. I would say quite a lot of interest and curiosity from even the men in power in the different institutions of the 3 countries about something exotic for them, but intriguing, because they have understood that when you go looking at groundwater resource management in rural areas, in that particular part of the world, very drought area, where the only resource is groundwater because there is no other surface water, definitely women have a particular role to play. There are women that are working in the ministries in Botswana, in South Africa, and in Namibia. Few hydrologists, and this is definitely something that has to be tackled. We need to improve the possibility for this career to women. I think women like it, like me, hydrogeology, like Muna. We are a living experiment that this is feasible. And definitely the education program has to improve. So we are starting on that, but we need funds, because these data are not waiting for us somewhere, are very much everywhere, a little bit. People have to be trained to understand which kind of data have to look for. And then, of course, each river basin, each aquifer is different from the other because the climate is different, the weather is different, the climate change impacts that are foreseen are impacting differently. The culture of the people is different. The social capacity, the society is different. So all these has to be taken into account when we talk about water resource management programs or weather and climate services in a particular area. Generalize too much will not serve our purposes. Having said that, of course, indicators can be useful, and some priority indicators have to be formulated. I also would like to say that to be happy when there are few women in a basin, a river basin organizations, or in aquifer management consultation mechanism, like, for example, in the Nubian sandstone aquifer or the northwestern Sahara Africa. I mean, to have women there is not enough. And in UNESCO, we are providing a very clear focus on that. It's not the number that is enough. It's really the fact that what they say count, that their proposal, their plan, their vision, their suggestion is taken into account in the policies that results of the decision of this governing board. And we don't have information about that. For the moment, even years ago, when we started in UNESCO, the only indicator was how many women participate in that one water resource meeting, seminar, workshop. So now, definitely, we have understood that we have to look how their participation as means something for the policy that is the results of that meeting. Well, of course, our mandate is to do something in UNESCO, so we try to do our best, and together with the colleagues of the education sector, we have established a series of UNESCO chairs on women and waters in Arab states, in Africa, in Latin America, in Asia. The UNESCO chair is something special. I mean, us to be really talking about a topic that is not the traditional or the classic curriculum at university. So this is why water and gender has received so much attention in different universities, in Morocco, in Latin America, in Argentina in particular, and other countries. And there will be very soon a meeting in the République Dominicaine, in Santo Domingo, very soon of all the water and gender chairs of UNESCO. Also to look at sex disaggregated data and how they can teach and how can sensitize about this topic in their own university. The fact that these chairs are linked are placed in a university is crucial because, of course, they can reach as much as possible young people and students in engineering, in chemistry, in geophysics, I mean, in all the branches of water sciences. Together with a colleague of WMO, we are also launched a program that is called GRAPHIC, that is groundwater for climate change adaptation measures, because we have very little information about how it is the role and what is the impact of climate change on aquifers, groundwater resources. You know, the same for when we look at transboundary rivers or aquifers. There are very few, I mean, let's say, not politically correct, but it's true. The grand vedette of international law are almost all men. I know that because I worked for years and years with the United Nations International Law Commissions, and there are very few international lawyers, vedette ladies. And this is, of course, a crucial issue because when you go for disputes, negotiations on transboundary waters, women are absent. And this is another program that we have in UNESCO, is the PCCP program on, it's a very nice acronym, means from potential conflicts to cooperation potential. And this is definitely a way to include gender in legal issues related to water resources, but in particular to link with how sex disaggregated data can also be considered when we talk about international conventions or UN conventions. We have, and I have to talk about that, Ursula, sorry, but I really have to, it's a great opportunity. We have made an inventory. I'm a groundwater specialist, I was introduced like that. We have made an inventory of transboundary aquifers around the world. You know that there are 300 international rivers. Now we have 2 conventions. The 97 convention has been ratified. We hope that the post-2015 will take this on board. And the 92 conventions, the Helsinki Convention, so here in Geneva with UNECE. But we have more than 400 transboundary aquifers. So the magnitude of the problem of groundwater resources, sharing aquifers resources, is definitely more to be taken into consideration urgently. And women's role there is important. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alicia. I think with all these activities now going on really and trying to put together wherever possible sex disaggregated data, what UNESCO has been starting is quite interesting, and well, I've learned a lot from what is going on. I was not aware, in particular with UNESCO Chair of Women and Water, and I think this is really also a good way of trying to focus on specific areas, and we all do know how complicated it is looking into the transboundary aquifers, and that we still, it's like a big white spot or black spot or whatever you name it, but an empty space on our landscape, so to speak. So still a lot more has to be done. We are aware of the funds and the funding needed to do more, but maybe it could also be done more systematically together by the UN family, for example, to focus on specific gender-related aspects. But I think this is then also something which has to be discussed in the SDG post-2015 context. Let me now turn to Jyoti, to another challenging area, which is water for peace, and which role women really could, can, should play in that area, as Jyoti has been so much involved in human rights related issues, in particular in Asian countries. I'm really interested what you can tell us here.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here. Peace. I have to say the world and we within it are not in a very good place today. And if I was to be simplistic, I would say that in all of the theaters of war that we see every day, bombarding into our rooms on television, the characters we see running around making war with guns and all kinds of ammunition are men, wherever. So being simplistic then, one could say men make war and women make peace. But that, as I said, would be very simplistic, because I also come from a region, which is the South Asian region, where perhaps more than any other region in the world, we've had the maximum number of women leaders. You know, the Begums in Bangladesh, Mrs. Gandhi and others in Pakistan, Benazir Bhutto in Sri Lanka. But then would that mean that under the leadership of women, the situation of women is any better? Of course not. So I think one has to move into a more complicated analysis of what does gender mean and management of or leadership of women in relation to all of these key issues, including water. What does that mean? And what is a complicated analysis of that? And I would also like to move us a little away from also complicating gender. All women are not the same. Women are not a homogeneous group. They are split up in religions, caste, ethnic minorities, indigenous, poor, rich. So a woman from a very poor caste community in a particular country may have much more common with the men in her family than she would with, let's say, George Clooney's wife, for instance, right? Just because they are women, you don't have this natural affiliation. So I think this, in complicating this analysis, let me relay to you an experience of mine around water. In a district of Nepal, a development agency which was charged with providing potable water to the villagers had ticked off the box by saying in that particular district it had now, all the villages had potable water. So it had done its development work in providing water. However, in the course of our work as human rights advocates, on the ground, we found that in many of the villages, the water faucet, the source of water, had been provided in quarters where the upper castes, the more dominant castes lived. So the people of the village who came from marginalized castes had no access to water, even though all the boxes had been ticked. So when this was relayed to the particular development agency, what did they do? They went and installed water sources in the other quarters as well, in the marginalized quarters, as a result of which both the dominant and the marginalized groups in the village had water. And yes, you could say, yes, everybody had access to water. But from our perspective, this ended up in recognizing and further entrenching discrimination within that community. And a message which comes from, the management at top and the leadership is that it's okay, we endorse the discrimination and you all have water. So, and I think sometimes we end up doing this also in endorsing discrimination between men and women. When we do not put a planning agenda, at the center of that planning agenda, we do not put men and women adequately, and women as well as men from communities for whom it really matters, not just, in terms of just men and token women. So there can be I think we understand that in our work, that there can be no hydrology or geology or biology or ecology without sociology, which means without social aspects, without human beings in effect. And who are these human beings? How do they dispense power? How do they control power? And what are their relationships with each other are critical and at the center of this. And unless we begin to unpack that, we will really not be able to talk about universal access to water, adequate access to water, quality of water. And I'm sure all of you sitting around the table, as well as all of you out there, know this fairly well from your work. I would also like to say that, this particular ecosystem of ours, as we all know, is extremely fragile. And if we define fragility further in terms of people who may or may not have access to the fruits of this ecosystem, such as clean water, land, food, air, clean air, then let me add that the poor those who are marginalized from various kinds of communities, caste, ethnic, racial, indigenous people, are indeed very fragile. And in all of these groups, the women are the most disadvantaged, as very often we've seen that they live lives in precarity and often in deep, deep distress. So inequality then lies at this addressing inequality to access in terms of water, as since we're talking about water, lies at the center of that which disturbs peace. Unless we are able to address issues of access in terms of inequality, there will always be small, low-grade elements of conflict which can erupt at any time. And I just want to give another example. Many of you would be aware that in India earlier this year, and I'm talking about India because I come from that country, 2 young girls from a marginalized caste were raped and lynched. And why did this happen? Because they were seeking to answer the call of nature. And they went to the field in the twilight hours because they had no toilet and they had no access to water in the toilet. Therefore, women have to go when it is dark to answer this call of nature. So a mere response, and these 2 girls were then raped. And so a mere response to a bodily necessity becomes life-threatening for some women in the world. And this led to a bitter caste conflict, a war, in fact, the ramifications of which continue to this day. So I'm merely narrating this example because there are several such from all over the world. But a number of girls we know have to, particularly on days when they are having their menstruation and there's no menstrual hygiene management, have to stop attending school because there are no toilets, or if there are toilets, there's no water in those toilets. And these are very, very, I think, significant issues. We've also had several instances, and ongoing ones right now, where there have been conflicts over water and access to water, affordability of water, particularly from communities who are disadvantaged and disempowered. Currently, one which is going on is in Brazil, which is I think now in the 9th month of a drought. And the communities who live in the slums and shanty towns have no access to water. So what are the barriers to access to water, which are sitting like a tinderbox, a spark which can be lit any time and fuel conflicts? We do know that in sub-Saharan Africa, for instance, 70% of the time is spent by women in collecting water. On an average, 60% of women's time the world over is spent in water collection. And often they have to walk long distances because the sources of water are very far away. We also know that on an average, 40 billion hours every year are spent by women in fetching water across the world. And because of the unsafety, if they have to walk long distances, if they have to go at various times of the day, they are exposed to all kinds of violence which women are exposed to across the world. These are all big or small forms of conflict or disturbance to peace, which are critical to address. Water-related diseases are particularly common because there's no safe access to water, and is a fundamental cause for child mortality. Pregnant women also are very vulnerable to water-related diseases carried by water. And during times of conflict, sort of raging conflicts, women are particularly constrained in their task of going and collecting water, because the water sources are also the ones which are cordoned off by those who are responsible for the conflict. So these are some of the barriers, some of the issues, and protection risks, distance from water sources, limited income, as well as lack of access to education, which enables them to be part of a water management system, constrains or restricts women's ability to either make decisions around water or to have safe environments in which to be able to access this water. Now, let me say that women's lack of access to water, or lack of access to water by communities, can both be a cause and a consequence of a conflict. And so we have to look at both ends of this. These can be causes because they can fuel, as I mentioned in the example earlier, they can exacerbate discrimination. They can exacerbate inequalities, and inequalities in turn can fuel conflicts. On the other hand, women's access to, lack of access to water can also be a consequence of a conflict where water sources are kept away, are cordoned off, are quarantined, and women and these communities are kept away from these water sources. So some of the actions that need to be taken in order to address some of these root causes which can happen in relation to water are that the right to water and sanitation is a right, is a human right which should be accessible to all. This is under international human rights law, to which many countries are parties. They have ratified these conventions, so it is an obligation to ensure that water, which is affordable, accessible, and of good quality, is made available to each and all without exception and without discrimination. Colleagues here on the panel have mentioned that we need to collect disaggregated data, not only in terms of women, but in terms of various communities and what is their access to water. We also have to analyze women's differential circumstances and vulnerabilities in relation to water and its access, as well as in relation to sanitation, because that is an integral part of this whole setup. We also need to recognize that right to water, clean water and sanitation, is a determinant of other rights. The right to health, the right to education, as I mentioned, a number of girls drop out of school because of this, and the right to life, indeed, are contingent upon the right to water. So the right to water is an extremely essential and fundamental right, and states are obliged to provide this. We need to create accessibility, and we need to create accessible accountability in terms of this right and the obligation towards this right. So women need to be incorporated in terms of water management and decisions regarding water. The indigenous knowledge, which one of the panelists mentions, is critical. And the other point I want to make urgently here is that it's not for us to empower women. I think meaningful participation of women who are the experts of their own lives and their own experiences in this instance will be able to tell us very well what is it that they need and how does this water management need to happen so that the quality of their life is bettered. They are the ones who need to be meaningfully brought into a process whereby decisions, plans, mechanisms are set up in terms of how water needs to be managed. And yes, indeed, in cases of where technical knowledge is critical, we need to also ensure that these women have that technical knowledge. So let me stop here. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Jyoti. I think you have really given the full spectrum and the challenges related to water for peace, what the risks are, and you said water is, so to speak, at the center of disturbing peace, and have really explained all the various facets. I do think there's no time now to have a round among our panelists, but I just would want to open the discussion to the podium, to the people here in this room, and would want you to participate and bring in your comments, questions you might have, so that we might have well, about 3 to 4 in the first round, and when we have some more time, the next round. Please, before you start asking your questions, identify yourselves and where you are coming from, so that we know that, and then after that we will respond to the questions. Who will start? Over there, please.
I am Anubha Kaushik from India. First of all, I would like to congratulate all the panelists for their wonderful discourses on various dimensions of water resource management. The message that comes from most of the speakers is that women do have a lot of potential in managing the natural resources. But at the same time, we find that they are not being included in the decision-making and policy-making process. From this point of view, I would say that the women are excellent managers of natural resources. Whatever little resources they have, they gather, they would spend it very judiciously for supporting their families in a sustainable manner. And I think this very inherent thing has gone into their nature, that they have the capability of managing the things in a very efficient manner. Now, in India also, I would say that in most of the cases, we find that the women are not getting much participation in the decision-making process. But in some parts of India, like in South India, I find that there are a few regions where the women are the leaders and they are managing the water systems in a very traditional manner. And the type of the distribution they are organizing, that even the tail-end farmer gets the water, because they know, they have it through their experience, they know how to use this water in a judicious manner for drinking purpose, for domestic use, and for the irrigation in the fields. I think that this type of the expertise and experience of the traditional knowledge of these women should be given due attention, and they should be included in the national distribution policy, how to manage the water resources. So this was one point. Another point I would like to speak on, since I am a university professor and basically an environmental scientist, and as everybody was saying, that there are very few women coming to this field, and I have been in this profession for the last 30 years. And I find that we have a good number of women, very good number of women coming to environmental sciences as such. And they are doing research also, going up to the PhD level. But still, I'm a bit afraid to say here that still they are not getting very good job opportunities. So one thing we have been emphasizing from the very beginning, that more and more people, more and more girls should come to this field. How to make this more attractive for them? I think what we have to ensure is that there should be good job opportunities. And in this context, as one of our colleagues was saying, that in UNESCO you are looking for such more projects like UNESCO Chair and all. I have a small suggestion to make, that can we have a sort of a database on well-qualified women in the field of water management, water pollution studies, who have done a lot of work in this field. So you should have, we can have a database on this so that we can utilize their potential, their expertise in some capacities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next.
Hi, I'm Anjal Prakash. I work with ISIMOD in Nepal. First of all, I'd like to congratulate the panelists for excellent presentations, and I want to compliment the talk by Jyoti, because from yesterday I think we've been discussing a lot on the essentialist argument of how women need to be there. I think we all convinced that there is definitely a need, but I think the point that you brought out on differences of the problems that we have in terms of caste, class, other differences, and that needs to be recognized. So just want to compliment, and probably a small point of difference in the experience that you have cited, the incidents that happened in Badaयूं, UP, on 2 girls that were hanged. Actually, the whole question of them not having toilet was one issue, but actually speaking, inherent issue was a caste conflict between 2 society, and then these girls were actually from Dalit community. And the whole discussion of having toilets actually moved the conflict, inherent conflict of caste and access to resources away from them, and that was a point which is criticized by many human rights activists. So that was point number 1. Second point, I want to ask all the panelists to give me one policy prescription or one policy move that you want to make in terms of accessing gender issues from a water perspective. So one issue that you think is close to your heart, that you want to convey this to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One more question in this round, down there, at the end.
Merci. Je viens d'Algérie, je suis agronome de formation. Alors, je voudrais soulever le problème de l'utilisation de l'eau dans l'agriculture. Alors, dans notre pays, il existe un système de gestion traditionnel de l'eau, à savoir le système des Fogara. Hélas, ce système, il est essentiellement géré par des hommes. Il n'y a pas de femmes. Bon, à côté de cela, il existe des méthodes modernes d'utilisation rationnelle de l'eau, sachant que l'eau est un élément stratégique et rare dans beaucoup de pays. Par rapport à cela, il y a bien sûr de la vulgarisation qui se fait pour les agriculteurs, et là aussi, les femmes dans mon pays ne bénéficient pas, pour diverses raisons, de beaucoup de cette vulgarisation. Alors, je voudrais savoir si, par exemple, au Liban, puisque le problème de l'eau se pose certainement aussi de manière accrue, est-ce que les femmes agricultrices bénéficient de sessions de formation pour exploiter de manière rationnelle l'eau dans leurs exploitations?
Thank you very much. I would now like to invite the panelists to respond, and then we have another round of questions. Alice, maybe you start.
I can immediately. Yeah. Thank you very much for the suggestion. Database on women role in, I would say, has to be decided what exactly, because natural resources is very vast. It should be water resource, but it's a very good suggestion as to be considered. Then maybe Muna will answer about the Fogara, but the Fogara that are also called Khanats in other regions and other countries of the region are definitely an heritage, not only a cultural heritage, but an indigenous knowledge heritage of managing water that should be definitely preserved and restored and quite adequately managed. I think I leave the others to answer to the other. Maybe I can immediately say that in the 97 Convention and then the 92 Water Convention, there is no mention at all about gender issue at all. So, well.
In terms of policy recommendations, I think that's very critical. I think a policy which is an inclusive policy should be able to have some special measures, positive measures, or what we call in positive discrimination, which ensures that women are part of a discussion on a planning area issue. And if women feel inhibited, they should be just women-only spaces where they are encouraged to come. Right to information, I think, is critical around water management and any decisions that are made around water which affect a community. And I think in particular, I would like to invoke a very important aspect of the Declaration on Indigenous Peoples, which is free, prior and informed consent in relation to water management around communities which will be seriously affected by any planning matter.
The question about the water awareness at the level of the farmer, actually in Lebanon, the gender issue at the level of the farmer is not a problem. The men are not opposing the woman to don't interfere in such things. It is the level of the government which is not doing well for the level of the farmers, because the women farmers even are disappearing, and we are getting help by strangers from outside the country doing such jobs, because it is very low cost to hire people for, because the government is not supporting the agriculture sector, so that the farmers are encouraged to plant their lands. They prefer that they would give it to somebody who exploits it and then give the money back for him. And especially from strangers. I don't want to say who are the strangers. And it's some people from outside the country who are get very low fees for that. So the gender issue at the level of the farmer is not a problem in Lebanon. Just the government is not supporting the agriculture sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I will try and also maybe share a practical example when it comes to, the professor indicated that you have a lot of women, but the challenge is jobs. And I think implementing agencies, they also have a responsibility to ensure at the leadership level you've got performance objectives that are looking at issues of job creation, and your programs that you come up with in terms of women development are addressed. I'll make an example. With the Department of Environmental Affairs at home, they do have bursaries that they provide, but the incentive, they employ the people. So as you get in, you know that there is a job secured. With the Weather Service, we are also doing the same, where we've got a bursary scheme, and we're saying 2/3 of that should be given to previously disadvantaged people so that there's equity, and 50% consider women. And when we go to Parliament and also having a shareholders compact with our minister, those issues are actually measured. And that's part of the performance of the institution. So it's also at our level, the implementers, to start coming up with programs that supplement the policies that are also raised. I think if one thing that I can say with passion is that there is a need for collaboration between different role players. And I'm going to give an example. I'm sure people, when you read around issues of water, we know that in South Africa we do have a challenge in terms of skill with hydrologists. But however, that also have an impact on weather and climate as the National Weather Service. So we decided to have an initiative where we have a consortium of different universities that are providing different expertise, atmospheric science, those that are good in agriculture, to have them, and also have the disaster management, the local government, to say how many of the hydrologists do you need, how many. Then we've got that plan. We took the plan together as a collective to the ministers for approval and endorsement. And then from there, we took it to the Department of Education, and we just had a workshop with also the interface of the other stakeholders. Now we are moving to phase 2 of resource mobilization. So I think we need to start looking at structured way of addressing these issues, because we know we've been talking about them, but coming up with pragmatic, practical ways of dealing with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. 3 more very brief questions, then we have to wrap up. Maybe one from this side. Is there? Yes, please.
Oui, bonjour. Moi, je suis Nicole P. Astelli de la République centrafricaine. Je vous remercie pour ce moment qui nous est offert. J'ai suivi avec beaucoup d'intérêt les intervenants et je me suis rendu compte que venant de différents horizons, nous avons tous un dénominateur commun et nous luttons tous pour une même cause. Alors, question d'autonomisation des femmes, question de mettre au point au niveau régional et des actions concrètes, mais j'ai vu que dans tous ces débats, nous n'avons pas suivi, j'ai pas suivi personnellement comment est-ce que on aurait mettre au point une méthode de suivi et évaluation. Parce que moi-même, en 98, il a été mis au point chez moi une organisation des femmes météorologistes et hydrologistes et des sciences connexes. Et à l'issue de cette organisation, moi-même, j'étais universitaire, j'étais venue à cette conférence et j'ai su qu'il y avait un métier intéressant qui était la météorologie, là où j'ai opté pour cela. Ben, au fait, n'eût été plein d'obstacles que j'ai connus à braver cette carrière, sinon si c'était que l'ambition et l'envie de me faire former qui a fait qu'aujourd'hui j'ai pu obtenir un diplôme en météorologie. Mais aujourd'hui je vois que plein de filles ont été sensibilisées, mais lorsqu'elles sont venues pour opter pour ces carrières, on leur dit que non, vous n'avez pas de bourse et elles se sont découragées. Et nous avons vu que chez nous, on a fait l'évaluation que le taux de chômage élevé ne sont que des scientifiques. Donc si on opte pour des carrières scientifiques, c'est vrai, nous poursuivons aujourd'hui dans ce même volet, je suis présidente de cette organisation, mais lorsque nous sensibilisons, ces filles nous disent que mais vous-même, vous avez de la peine à vous intégrer, vous nous dites de vous suivre. Alors j'aimerais qu'il soit mis au point une manière d'évaluation et de suivi, surtout pour nous les pays en voie de développement. Je vous remercie.
Merci bien pour ce commentaire. Yes, please, down there.
Ouvrez. Ok. Merci. Je me présente. Je suis Madame Guerel, Bailey Toine Odette Elisabeth. Je suis la présidente de l'Organisation nationale des femmes rurales Fleurs de Centrafrique. Donc, je viens de la République centrafricaine aussi, comme ma prédécesseur. Donc, moi, je remercie d'abord le bon Dieu. Je remercie tous les organisateurs de cette conférence et je remercie tous les intervenants d'hier jusqu'à aujourd'hui. Sur ce qui concerne la femme et l'eau, c'est un sujet très crucial, car tout ce que vous avez dit concerne les femmes, concerne la femme et l'eau, la violence contre les femmes à cause de besoins naturels. Et comme vous le dites, ce sont les pays en voie de développement qui en souffrent le plus. Je pourrais prendre un exemple précis sur notre pays qui est en ébullition en ce moment. Je vous dis en ce moment que les femmes rurales ou les femmes en Centrafrique sont en train de souffrir, beaucoup à cause de l'eau. Car l'eau publique que les gens utilisent sont l'eau de robinet, le forage et les puits. Mais pendant la guerre qui sévit en ce moment, tous les puits sont infectés parce qu'on jette les cadavres dedans. les forages sont défectueux par les coups de fusil. Et elles ne peuvent pas aller chercher de l'eau dans les rivières, car c'est dangereux pour elles. Ma question est celle-ci. Pendant tout ce que vous avez dit, quelles sont les stratégies prises par l'OMM ou par d'autres organisateurs, d'autres financiers qui soutiennent les activités des femmes? Quelles sont les stratégies prises par vous pour pallier à ce problème des femmes qui souffrent dans les pays en voie de développement? J'en ai fini.
Merci beaucoup. Une autre intervention ici? One other comment, and then we have to, or question, then we have to close this round.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Vesela Monta. I work for the International Rainwater Harvesting Alliance. Thanks a lot to all the panelists. It was very interesting from different point of view, your opinions. I wish to complete what you have said with a question. What are the new trends in the policy of rainwater harvesting? For a long time, this way of management of water resource was treated as oldish, not interesting for very few people. It's not such the case, even it answers very well to the question which was asked just before me. And the IPCC gave a very important answer on this question. It designed rainwater harvesting at the top place for adaptation in the sector water. So what is done in this case, knowing that it is very gender friendly, it is a holistic way of managing water. It is the only one which replenish the aquifers and not pumping water from them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would now like to invite the panel members to briefly respond to the relevant questions, comments, and what their main message is, and so that we then, after that, can close down. I start with Alicia.
Yeah. First of all, women meteorologists. Unfortunately, and Bruce can tell me if I'm wrong, unfortunately, funds and government commitment to maintain weather and climate monitoring on a long-term efficient base are declined everywhere in the world. And WMO and UNESCO can do their best, but if there is no clear commitment on a long-term basis from the government to really invest on that, the impact is that there are no jobs, no services, no job, no improvement on data collection, no information about climate change, no information about precipitation, groundwater recharge, etc., etc. So all these goes together. And of course, we, the two organizations, are doing our best to call the attention on this issue. But I mean, I would like to say that women meteorologists, as women groundwater experts, of course, have to be supported in having jobs because are very few. Method of the last was about peace. So maybe this is definitely for her. But I can also switch to French. Je pourrais aussi parler en français un tout petit peu. La relation entre la femme et la gestion du territoire, la gestion de l'eau, les fogaras, l'aspect de l'agriculture et la femme, la qualité de l'eau, tout ça est bien évidemment très lié. Le changement climatique va avoir un impact fondamental sur la capacité des femmes de soutenir leur foyer quand cette femme travaille dans l'agriculture, parce qu'on va voir des zones de plus en plus arides dans certaines régions, et bien évidemment moins de revenus et moins de récoltes, moins de produits. C'est bien évident que celle qui est la collecte de l'eau pluviale est fondamentale, le rain water harvesting. C'est une technique dans laquelle les femmes ont déjà beaucoup fait et peuvent continuer à faire énormément. Si, bien évidemment, leur travail est valorisé, payé pour le juste prix, si une formation est faite, si ce qu'ils font est considéré par la société de façon réelle, comme un vrai apport à la gestion du territoire et de la ressource. Pour le moment, on n'en est pas là, malheureusement.
Thank you very much. I think following the discussions, I think it's important that we look at developing a stakeholder engagement plan, considering the fact that we have different, as much as we talk about women, but they are not homogeneous. So we need to have some form of engagement with them, and then from there start to have communication plans on how we communicate with those different stakeholders. And in that it will help us to have a better understanding on and a better delivery of gender-sensitive services to address the imbalances. The other area that it's also important that we need to look at, it's important to, when we also talk about the indigenous knowledge, when we look at information and knowledge management, how do we link those to come up with the necessary intelligence for risk management and for planning? How do we go about doing that? I think it's very important to look at that. And working with also communities, even those that are illiterate. And in that area, we'll have the assistance of those that are in social science and also in communication. Partnership, for me, is very important. And the other area that is also so important for adaptation, it's application research, where we look at coming up with a socio-economic specific application for different sectors. Like, for example, at home, when we look at floods, where there is a challenge for, especially with informal settlement, we have looked at innovation of coming up with a community rain gauge, where that can be connected to the cell phone and use that to warn communities. And we've launched that. We're trying to get funds in working probably with some of the mobile operators. So how do we then use the technology to do that? I think then coming to the WMO initiatives, Global Framework for Climate Services is one of the platform that I think will be important for us to use in making sure that we address some of the issues, the skills, observation network, interface, capacity development. But coming to the other question that has been raised in terms of rural women, what is it that the WMO is doing? We also have regional association, and we have one for Africa, where we develop our own strategy. And I think it's important that we take these issues that are being raised now, and also when we develop our strategy as a collective in Africa, we look at those issues of conflict, water, and as we deal with a global framework for climate services. We also have within the WMO the monitoring and evaluation unit. We will be meeting on Saturday to look at all this and see how can we come up with a way of monitoring, identifying issues that we need to look at. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Linda. Mona, and then Jyoti, very briefly, please.
Actually, I wanted to stress on the fact that for the transboundary issue, which is the woman can play an important role, since most of the we have a lot of transboundary basins, which there is a lot of conflict. So the women install a more peaceful atmosphere for dialogue, which is extremely needed when discussing the hydro diplomacy issues. Because I have experienced that I was in the committee for transboundary basin between neighboring country, and the men was raising very tough dialogue, and I was trying to settle down this because you know the men are very take the things seriously from their personal, and so the women take it in a reasonable way, and she look at the source. The very important subject, which is she cares about more than the personal, or so I want to stress about this. I wanted to talk about that because Lebanon, as I said, to continue with the WMO, that what is the case that the country has not a reliable service. How you can help the country in improving the situation before integrating the gender issue. And I think if we keep communication between all the countries and talk about the success stories, perhaps some countries are more advanced than the others, would share the experience and keep monitoring if we make an action plan or something with focal points in the countries to go through and get advanced in such issue and the water management as a whole. Thank you.
Very quickly, I think we presume that water management is something we are doing now. Whereas for generations, for eons, communities have managed their water systems. And that knowledge and those systems have been systematically sometimes destroyed. So from my perspective, coming from a human rights organization doing human rights work, what we have started doing is looking at the human rights impact on communities and on people, and certainly on women as well, of certain decisions that have been made, which have either destroyed or had negative impacts on traditional water management systems and indigenous knowledge. And then in relation to that, then we produce guidance, normative guidance, emerging out of international human rights law, which offers, for instance, on business and human rights, we have the UN guidelines and principles on what is permissible for businesses to do. And in particular, I have in mind the Cochabamba case, which some of you might know, in Bolivia, which led to a number of protests on account of the privatization of municipal waters, because the World Bank wanted the water system to be more efficient as a result of conditionalities to aid. So I think these kind of documentation of cases is important, and then what we do is produce guidance, normative guidance in that. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thanks to my panel members. Thanks to the audience for all your very interesting but also challenging question. We do know that accessing water and the gender balance is really a very complex, I would say a lifelong issue and a lifelong challenge we have to jointly look into and take action together. We have to do it on various levels, as we have discussed, and we have to get men and women and the young generation, boys and girls involved, otherwise it will not work and we will not be able to move on. Education and training at all levels is very important, and I do think from all my life in development cooperation, the UN family can do a lot together with all the other partners to move these issues and the challenges along and try to solve certain elements here and there, and with the post-2015 discussion and the ongoing discussions next year until the end of the Millennium Development Goal years, we can do a lot together and see how we can jointly improve the world we live in, never forgetting that water is life. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to our panel. That was a really informative and wide-ranging discussion. We appreciate it. Okay, so it's time for another break. I'm going to ask your indulgence to make this just a 20-minute break this time, so that we can start just about 4:35 back on our working sessions. Once again, we have coffee service. Please help yourself. There's lots of snacks. Afterwards, we will have parallel working sessions in the same way we have for the last after the last two high-level panels. We'd like at least 70 of you to go down. Very good panel discussion on ensuring that climate information reaches women users, some of the topics we've started here today. In this Sal, at Sal Obazi at the same time, we'll be talking about empowering women to participate in water science and policy. There will be interpretation in this room until 5:30. There will not be interpretation in C1, but if you need interpretation, let me or one of the other WMO staff know. We have people speaking dozens of languages here. If you want interpretation in C1, we will try to find you a partner who can help. Okay, thanks very much.
under the mud. This is a poor region of Sri Lanka, known for tea plantations. The plantation workers are housed in small shacks, many now destroyed or engulfed by mud.
It is not working, no sound.
The children were in school when the disaster struck. That saved their lives, but many are now suddenly orphans.
We are still looking to see if we can find any more survivors. Survivors, especially children, are given shelter in the schools nearby.
All this was triggered by heavy monsoon rains. The bad weather is causing chaos. Blocked railways and roads make it harder for rescue teams to work. Jill McGivering, BBC News. Emergency.
Can I see? Put this a little bit here. Then I'm watching myself. And it's
Yeah.
awkward.
Are you going to speak from here? Okay, a very good afternoon to all of you, and welcome to the session on empowering women to participate in water science and policy. I understand this is the last session of the day. It's a long day for all of us, and I always consider this last session as a graveyard session. People really, trying to have low energy. But we have an answer to this because we have got a session which the format we call the Ignite session. So we are going to ignite all of you. And first request, can you all move in closer to us? Because I see that people are spreading all over. Is it possible to just move closer here, this side? Yeah? No? Okay. Okay, fine. Anyway, so one more request that I have is to please close your laptops if you could, because we would like to entertain you a little more with the question that we have in hand. First of all, I'm Anjal Prakash, and I'm moderator of the session. This is a particular format called Ignite format, in which all our speakers are going to have a 5 minutes opening remark, but there'll be a slide which is going to move. There are 15 slides which will move in time, so they will have to finish at that particular time, so 5 minutes. And after this in opening remarks, we would have a question-answer session, and this is followed by a group discussion. We have 5 major questions, and we will divide ourselves in 5 groups, and we'll try and seek answers to those questions. So welcome to this session. I am working with EC Mode, and I'm coordinating a project called Himalayan Adaptation, Water and Resilience Research on glacier and snowpack dependent river basins. This is particularly in South Asia. I'm working in 3 river basins, Indus, Ganges, and Brahmaputra. I have a very esteemed panelist with me. I would like to introduce first Professor Margreet Zoutwijn. Margreet is a professor of water governance at UNESCO IHE, Institute of Water Education in Delft, in Netherlands. She looks at water allocation policies and practices for focusing on questions of equity and justice. Her current research works at reallocations of water from agriculture and rural areas to cities and industry. She studies how the introduction of supposedly water-efficient technologies like drip irrigation goes accompanying with and causes and changes in water tenure relationship that favor some people and more than others. And one more introduction is that she is my teacher. She taught me gender and water. She was the first one to teach me gender and water issues and in the course. So welcome, Margreet. My second speaker here is Ms. Kusum Atukorala. Kusum holds a degree in Master of Science degree in Managing Rural Change from Imperial College London. She is having cross-disciplinary background with and having crossing a lot of academic boundaries in her previous experience as a university teacher in language and culture studies to water resource management. She is a multidisciplinary and internationally recognized in her work on rural development, integrated water resource management, and particularly gender and water. She heads a network called Network Water in Sri Lanka, and she is recognized very well in South Asia and also in other international circuits. So welcome, Kusum, to this session. My third speaker for today is Ms. Vesela Monta. Vesela is a civil engineer with a master's degree from the Higher Institute of Civil Engineering and Architecture in Bulgaria. She worked as civil engineer in Bulgaria, Ethiopia, and Switzerland. She joined the International Rainwater Harvesting Alliance in 2002 and has been involved in rainwater harvesting activities, including project implementation, training, awareness raising, networking, and political work. She is currently the Executive Director of International Rainwater Harvesting Alliance and the initiator of what we call a Blue School program. So welcome, Vesela. And the last speaker is Bebete Resurrection. She is a senior research fellow at Stockholm Environment Institute in Thailand and adjunct associate professor at the Asian Institute of Technology. She has done research, teaching, and consulting on gender, livelihood, migration, climate change adaptation, and natural resource management in the Philippines, Thailand, Vietnam, and Cambodia. Among her current research projects are ones on gender, disaster recovery and mobility in the Philippines, gender, climate adaptation and water stresses in peri-urban South Asia, and a grant awarding program on water governance in Mekong region. So as you can see, we have an esteemed panel, and each one of them bring in a very distinct experience from different perspectives on gender and water issues. Before I start the Ignite session, I would like to acknowledge the contribution of two important members. One is Anathea Brooks. She's sitting there from UNESCO. She has worked really hard to put us together. We have been working from almost like 15 to 20 days very closely, and I'm sure much later before. And Bruce Stewart, he's from WMO, and I don't see him here, probably he's downstairs, and he's also been working very closely with us. So these two people are acknowledged. We start with the first presentation by Margreet. Margreet.
Thank you, Angel. Well, to date, most gender and water studies have focused on those poor women out there, with the objective of showing that these women are important water actors too, and to get legitimacy for their powers and rights. The focus on these poor women, however, makes it seem as if gender only matters at the level of access and at the level of users, and if there's no gender issues within the communities of researchers and scientists. After all, science is neutral and objective. Isn't that true? I want to use this presentation to challenge that idea that water science is neutral and objective. And what I want to say is that increasing the number of female scientists in water requires not just empowering women, but also changing professional cultures and identities. This is a picture for you to look at and for you to identify. It's a question: can you identify the water scientist in this picture? I'm sure you have some idea. And if you do, it goes to show that doing science is not just the rigorous application of scientific norms, but doing science has everything to do with behavior, with dress, with how you look, what you say, how you speak. So science is also cultural, it's performative. Science actually can be looked at as a culture. You have academic tribes, and at the current age and date, to be a scientist almost equals being a white man. And this is not something that is self-evident or that stems from the fact that men are naturally better at doing science. No, it is a social and historical construction, which works both ways. In water, for instance, building and designing dams and dikes is a very efficient way to become and be recognized as a real man. So this is a picture of one of the Dutch water heroes, Engineer Lely. And here are some more quotes that go to show that water authorities' rights and powers are defined and divided in gender according to and based on gender hierarchies. Which means, all this means that if you are a woman and you aspire a career in water science, this is difficult. You have to do hard work. And it may appear as a gender inauthentic choice. Either you are a woman and therefore not a good engineer, or you are an engineer and therefore not a good woman. I have some quotes here from a study done among women water professionals in South Asia, which all illustrate this. It illustrates how women are actually discouraged to pursue a career in water because people think it's not suitable for women or for different reasons. And this is what is behind these dualisms. The profession is defined as masculine. So the very definition of the profession goes hand in hand with the definition of what it means to be a good man. And these dualisms, which are mutually exclusive, feed into very, very deeply held prejudices, which I also have. All of us have them. And that, for instance, work among reviewers of scientific articles who give a higher rating of the articles if they know that the author is a man, or the same thing for proposals scientific proposals. Similar proposals are ranked more highly if it carried the name of a man in comparison to whether it carried the name of a woman. All this goes to show that these are prejudices. These are deeply held prejudices, and it means that for a specific sort of white man, it's much more easy, it's easier to excel in water science and to assume to be recognized as a good water professional than it is for all others. My conclusion is that we should recognize that science is also a culture and a performance. We should also realize that ideas of what it means to be a good scientist, a good water scientist, are culturally linked to ideas of what it means to be a good white man. Developing more diverse, more gender diverse communities therefore means challenging science, challenging masculinities, positive action.
Thanks, Margaret. Could we have a round of applause for her? Our next speaker is Vesela. Welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Vesela Monta. I will speak on behalf of the International Rainwater Harvesting Alliance. I will speak about, of course, rainwater harvesting, and I will link rainwater harvesting with gender, with climatology, with meteorology, and hydrology. I would like to introduce to you our organization, IRA. It is an international NGO which has a special consultative status with ECOSOC. Its mandate was formulated 12 years ago in Johannesburg, and its mission was to create an international platform for promotion of rainwater harvesting. In fact, what is rainwater harvesting? It's very simple. It means management of rain as water resource. And this management is concentrated on three different fields, equally important: retention for flood prevention, infiltration for replenish the aquifers, and direct use, which you know what does it mean. But rainwater for whom? WHO and UNICEF joined forces to explain that a lot of people in this world, they have no other means to provide water than rainwater harvesting. In rural areas, there are 76 million, but one day, very soon, this number will be tripled by climate change. And for what is useful rainwater harvesting for? For rain-fed agriculture, for watershed restoration, aquifer recharge, small islands, polluted regions, for hygiene and health. And all of these fields are equally important for people. So we'll speak already a day or two about gender empowerment in water policy. Why? Why it's important? First, for social justice. We cannot only propose to women the burden to fetch water. We should also propose something else, some empowerment. And I will tell you a story about empowerment of Maasai women. We see here on the picture two Maasai women, Agatha and Alice. I met them in a conference a few years ago. They are Maasai, very colorful, very joyful people from a very really dry region in Kenya. There was a rainwater harvesting project in their lands led by Mildred Mkandla, who is very eminent rainwater harvesters, which trained these women to build by themselves their rainwater harvesting tanks, and they were very proud of this, and many people followed them and started to build tanks after them. So Agatha shared with me, now my husband started to respect me finally, and I have a lot of time to care about my children. Yes, but a lot of people, a lot of women, they lose many hours per day, still lose to fetch water. I tried to imagine a game which we can continue after the presentations of question and answers. Is there anything which link rainwater harvesting, health, meteorology, and climate change? I will read only one line of this. Mom, what is rain? Rain is water, son. So why don't you collect it? And I will propose another game, the game Imagine. You remember the very beautiful song of John Lennon, Imagine that. So imagine that you invest in education, that we install a scholarship system giving advantage to girls, that install a competition system for assigning high-level posts. This will be different, will make different inequality. And here I'm coming to the core, to the heart of our vision in IRA. The girls' education. Every year, 31 million girls are out currently of school, and 2/3 of the women, illiterate people in the world are women. How can we change this situation? By the gender equality, according to us, start in school, at least at school age. So we can work with the population, we can change the schools, we can make them hygiene place. And here comes the IRA Blue Schools program, because our believings already also are translated in direct implementation actions. We have hardware, but software also. We create a hygienic environment, but also teach children how to work this.
Thank you so much.
It's not from my presentation.
Okay.
Anyway,
yeah,
my last word, and you cannot see the slide, is that we empower also population, and we work for their equality.
Bebete, time is yours.
Thank you, and good afternoon to you all. The title of my presentation is A Chilly Climate for Women in Water Science and Policy, and I will generally talk about how science and policy have not been a friendly terrain for women, and possibly offer some explanations to why this is the case, to why it has not been a warm and cozy place for women, and possibly some transformative pathways. Okay. It's often thought that women and girls are at least half the available science, engineering, and technology talent pool. However, that said, there are a number of constraints. These constraints are usually individual, they're cultural, as Magritte has mentioned, as well as structural, and that they constrain the participation of women in this whole talent pool. Now, a number of factors actually come up with respect to trying to explain why women are often facing such constraints. And one factor, the first of which is women and men are actually assigned gender-associated hierarchical roles and jobs in water and climate bureaucracies, usually defined by gender norms and usually associated, especially in the case of women, with their traditional caring roles. Additionally, in educational systems, these may channel women away from water and climate-related disciplines. There are judgments, for instance, about girls' abilities to actually succeed in the sciences. There's also limited access to enabling and qualified mentors in these fields. There are also gender-based inequities in these fields themselves, as well as a short supply of resources and opportunities. For instance, a lack of scholarships for women. For instance, as well, weak access to information regarding scholarships. I'm reminded, for instance, of a master's student I once had some years ago, and upon offering her the possibility of doing a doctorate, she was a top student, she declined, saying her parents said it will be quite difficult for her to actually find a husband in her homeland, Vietnam. So we find that in general, women, as a result, lack confidence in their abilities to do well in the sciences, if at all they are enrolled in the sciences. Plus the fact that there's not an enabling environment. There's a lack of supportive networks as well as mentors in this field. Also, traditionally, the field, especially of water and climate, have been masculine in large part. And this has not been widely discussed. Often it is silent and tacit, showing and demonstrating that this is a field that is often considered as part of the normal order of things. I take the case, for instance, of the National or the Department of Water Resources in Thailand. If you look at the levels or the ranks from 1 to 10, as the ranks grow higher, you find that women actually thin out in terms of their numbers. So, given this, certain questions emerge. Can gender balance, as discussed earlier since yesterday, actually transform gender hierarchies and alter and transform male-dominated decision-making practices? Or a solution often put forward is that of gender mainstreaming. Now, here are some possible ways forward. It's not just about achieving gender balance, but actually, more importantly, nurturing a consciousness for gender equality. I would rather have a few feminist men than a lot of patriarchal women. Interacting as well with other organizations that may demonstrate more democratic models of learning and doing. This could potentially create new networks of influence as well as new networks or platforms for negotiation in water and climate terrains. Also, I call this the rice cake effect, where there is heat on top in baking the cake and heat from the bottom. So we find that champions are often those, for instance, in the development donor community. But what about women's organizations that actually can push the gender envelope much more forward? One other way is, of course, commonly known, is that of affirmative action. But I would argue that it's not just enough, and this should just only be a starting point, but together with recruiting women, there should be active consciousness raising and constant reflection on the need for parity. And finally, and parity not only in terms of gender, but also in terms of class, in terms of ethnicity, as well as of race, as well as of age. Gender mainstreaming. Enough of gender mainstreaming that is ad hoc, enough of gender mainstreaming that's token. We want gender mainstreaming that is definitive and deliberate. Thank you.
Thanks, Deb. Now I'm going to start with my presentation, a short presentation, followed by Kusum. So, my presentation actually is going to focus on the whole issue of why women are missing in the water sector itself from the policy and the science and policy arena. And the presentation actually is starting with the whole issue of, the contradiction and from the part of the world that I belong to is South Asia, and especially from the Hindu mythology, how gender has been viewed. And the next slide that you will see, where I'm trying to see from the perspective of there's a whole understanding of what we call Ardhanarishwar. It's a Lord who is half woman and half man. So this is a kind of a understanding that we get from the Hindu mythological understanding of how male and female principles are inseparable, and their masculine and feminine principles. And here, if you look at Western understanding of feminist understanding, here female is active force and the male is what we call a passive force. So the totality actually lies in the bisexuality, and this is one part of the whole thing. But the second part of this whole issue is that you have gender-based violence in India. Every 22nd, there's one woman who is raped. 20 minutes, there's one woman raped. From yesterday, when the conference started, there are about 200 women have been raped only in India. And this is, so this whole contradiction of religion saying one thing and what actually is happening. And so we actually try and think of how do we actually get into what constitute women water professionals, and from, what is the status of these professionals. And we try to look into some of the studies from Saki Waters, where I worked earlier. And there we looked at 4 countries, India, Nepal, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka, and Pakistan, And we found that there are actually, in the irrigation CAT department, we simply looked at the number. We found that there are very few women who represented actually in these departments. And that actually the percentage is about 1.5% to 17.4%. There has been a huge stereotyping in terms of women working out in the field, especially in the irrigation department. As women engineers, they were actually supposed to be doing field work, but they were made to do administrative work. The kind of clothing they were expected to wear, certain kinds of clothes, they were expected to behave in certain ways. So these are a whole lot of stereotyping which was attached. And so we wanted actually to find out what stops women, because we found that there are a lot of women who join these irrigation department, but they actually miss out. So after a certain point, we don't see them, and then we don't see any women on the top. And this particular slide is from Bangladesh Water Development Board, and if you could see as tracers, still it's called draftsman, not draftsperson or whatever, and engineer, there are a lot of women there, but at the top, as additional chief engineer, there are very few women. Similarly, from Andhra Pradesh state in the South India, you also have a similar situation where you have a lot of women joining. So this shows the organization culture. So there's one part is that you have socioeconomic culture that restrains, there's a structural problem in which restrains women to come out. The second part is that the organizations are not also able to withhold women, and there the problem lies. If you look at the enrollment in Nepal, Western Engineering College in Pokhara, Nepal, you have the higher percentage of male students taking civil engineering courses. And civil engineering is one of the courses, one of the discipline from where most of the water engineers come. So there is discrimination right from the start. I have three main points to add here. One is that, whatever we do, probably we need to have women's perspective in our research. If we do research, if we are doing an action program, policy is a program. That's point number one. Because as you are, taking those into account, then only you will be having more gender-sensitive policies. Second is, has any of our move, whatever we are doing, have challenged existing gender relations? And if you look at this picture, you have a young water professional, water engineer, who is actually doing a training in Bangladesh, surrounded by all men. This is challenging normal gender relations. Third is, have we given equal space? If you look at this picture, you'll find a girl who is studying and who has a small child. And this is 2014 in in India, one of the states in India. So this is the situation. So you do not have enough space, equal space for women to perform, and so you do not expect them to come out in the large number and participate in the whole process. So at lastly, what I feel that equality actually doesn't mean justice. Justice is when you actually give a kind of a platform or give a special attention to these issues, and then only you can take this forward. Thank you so much. We have a Kusum now. So do we have the clip on?
Yeah, I'll tell you when. I'll tell you when I want it on.
Okay.
Not just now. Thank you very much, Anjal. Thank you for the introduction. And I'd like to introduce Netwater, because Netwater is an activity which was started up because of many of the issues which all the speakers have mentioned. And our work is the AAA, awareness, advocacy, and action. And now that you are here to talk about the gender dimensions of weather and climate services, let's put on this video which gives us a very graphic representation of what happens
Emergency
when
rush to the scene.
I think you have seen this. And I'm trying to explain why must we ensure that climate information must go to communities. The Koslada tragedy you see is a sad but telling answer to this question. The mudslide followed high-intensity rain, symptomatic of climate change, in a tea estate area, in a very remote area of poor people, the poorest in Sri Lanka with the lowest human development indices.
The low level of education is a barrier to the awareness building on climate change adaptation that we do in very many other areas, because these people are paid by the day. If they come for a program, they cannot eat that particular day. So the daily paid workers, especially the women workers whom we try to access and reach out to, cannot afford to come to awareness programs. And we have had very many climate change awareness programs, but not in these areas. These are areas which are demarcated as being high risk, but the people are poor and they cannot move out. Information doesn't come in. We have 350 rain gauge stations, 24 met stations, 35 male meteorologists, 6 female. We have 42, I think, rain stations, 35 agromet stations. But the information does not reach people in time. And this is what the result is. These people who were warned to leave did not leave. The mudslide came when the children were away in school, so many of them were saved, but they are now homeless orphans. So I think that part of the issue for me is, are we having information and which does not reach the community? And if that is the case, then we are doing something very wrong. We have to change this system. In the high-risk communities especially, which are living through extreme weather events, now for Sri Lanka, 100 millimeters a day, getting 1 month's rain in one day is becoming a norm. So we have to have a proper awareness procedure. And especially, the information has to reach men and women. There has to be significant lead time for evacuations. The information, again, has to go in order to evacuate in the middle of very heavy rains. But what if we put this around? What if the community itself learned to recognize the danger? What if in this place we had a crude rain gauge and a younger educated woman who was trained to read it, who could say that, you had gone beyond that dangerous 100 millimeters and it is time to move? Isn't it the time that maybe we have to empower women to participate, not through formal water science in institutes, but through community science? So I think for me, this session raises more ifs than answers. My second intervention would be on how to increase the number of women. We have had a lot of opinions on that. We have a lot of information on that. For me, the increase of women in the weather and climate services is quite different to increasing the women's participation in the design and operation of irrigation systems and water supply systems. I'm coming on from my experience in mostly South Asia and mostly Sri Lanka. One reason is that the first group is mainly office-based, and the second is largely fields-based, unless you are a design engineer. Unless you are studying lightning strikes, I don't think the Met Department officers need to go to the field. Now, Sri Lanka has a long history of women professionals getting into the field, but they have been, 1898 was the first doctor, but they come to the medical and teaching professions which are seen as appropriate for women. The first lady engineer graduated in the 1960s, and the first Met officer, I think, was recruited in the early 1990s. And the major obstacle for women water professionals in the water sector is the long hours in the field and the many days out of home, which are going against the prevailing cultural norms and the gender norms. And this has led, I think, too many bright young women leaving the water sector and opting for the IT sector, even after following a postgraduate course in water resources. I remember, Anjal, that our friend in Anna University, Tamil Nadu, once lost 12 female. The entire clutch was lost. Female postgrads left her to go into the IT field. In Sri Lanka, we have had irrigation engineers who have opted to become interior designers. Probably it's more profitable, but it takes, what I'm trying to emphasize is, unless they have a deep personal commitment and enormous strength of personality to overcome challenges, there's very few institutional incentives to retain women in the water sector. Burnout is becoming more and more frequent now in the water sector. But comparatively, the females in the Met Department have less field work. But now we are talking about putting in more women in high-profile areas. But if those women work in the business as usual mode, what is the benefit which will accrue to men and women in communities? And let us ask ourselves that question before we set quotas. That question has to be answered through systematic research and evidence-based advocacy, and this we do not have now. If women leaders do not operate with sensitivity to community needs and awareness of about prevailing gender norms and calendars, willing to bring about institutional changes, what is the use of such a woman leader? So as we are about to set out quotas, we need to build a strong rationale based on sound research as we did in Sri Lanka. I am happy that at least in Sri Lanka, Anjal, some of those data is wrong. Out of the 7 women who started off Netwater, one has become the first Director General of Irrigation in all of Asia, the first Director General of Coast Conservation, and for Sri Lanka, the first professor in agricultural engineering. So I think that you have to build these platforms where women can collectively face these challenges. So I think that, thank you.
Thanks, Kusum. I would request a round of applause for all the speakers, please. Thank you. Thank you. It's just to energize yours. Okay, so I'm opening the floor for immediate questions, and yeah, please raise your hand. The translators will go at around 5 o'clock or something. It's time for them to go. So if anybody who needs the translation, I would give them first preference, and otherwise English will be better. I'm sure all the presentations have provoked some of your thoughts. Please do question. If not, then I'm going to pick people and then ask them to ask questions. Okay, Madhav. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay, my name is Madhav Karki, and I put on a lot of different hats. So right now I'm saying I'm the South Asia Chair of the IUCN Commission on Ecosystem Management. Now, the session is on empowering women to participate in water science and policy. My experienced sort of a knowledge, and then I think this is now already a public knowledge, that politicians who make policy makers, they understand 2 things. One, they understand their voters. If the voters are happy, they will make policy. Another thing is they are concerned, they are sensitive about money. If it costs less, the policies are, I think, easy to influence. So my question, I think all panels you have presented quite, I would say, powerful, you made quite powerful statements. What evidence can you present to the policy makers which are powerful enough to influence policies? And in that context, like Kusumi presented in Sri Lanka, the evidence of so many deaths is a very powerful, I would say, powerful to influence policy. But do you think the information which are provided, perhaps the information will be provided more targeted, in a more targeted manner, but will the women in that community who are mostly poor will know how to use the information to really prepare, mitigate the hazards which exist in that area? So that's my question. How do you create evidence? And then, of course, again, I would like to say that to participate in really in science and influence policy, it's good that DGs and engineers, senior policymakers are already women, but then will it be sustained? Will the next one, how do you ensure? And this question I had asked earlier also. Okay, thanks a lot.
I will collect a couple of questions and then I'll ask the panelists to answer. Anyone from this side? Yeah, please, go ahead.
Thank you very much for the informative deliberations. As highlighted by most of the speakers in the panel, I got the perspective that most women or ladies fail to pursue a career in science as a result of cultural background, as well as no cultural background, which leads to a negative attitude in terms of pursuing mathematics, science, or science-related field. So my question really is, I would want to have a suggestion or a recommendation from the panelists on how to deal with these attitude issues on the national levels, to try and assist the ladies or the young girls to deal with the attitude problem or cultural issues.
Someone from this side? Yeah. Okay.
Hi, my name is Carmen Capriles. I am from Bolivia. I'm engineer in agriculture, and I have worked a lot on the ground with water systems, and well, some appreciations about the work that how to engage women with in the field with water. It's not always that easy because, for example, irrigation in the highlands in the Andes where I work, the irrigation is done by men. One, because it needs lots of handwork to dig the channels so water can go there. Two, because water at the irrigation hours, it's freezing. So mostly they don't want women to participate because they may get sick because of the temperature, and not only sick because they are like weak, but also sick because they have to take care of most of the time probably they're pregnant and so on. So that's why irrigation in those places are a man's task. The other thing that I could see is that as soon as the technology is much simpler, you have a wider participation of women, but as the technology starts being more complicated, then it becomes the field of the men. For example, if you're trying to put irrigation systems with pumps, with water pumps and different kinds of elements, as much complex it is, men have more participation. But if it's much simpler, like the water pump that we see in some places, then it becomes like the field of the women. So those are things that we have to take into account when we go to the field to see the work, because it's not that the only discrimination because of gender. It has deeper roots, and we have to keep on working in these roots in order to make water accessible and easy to access for the women, because that's one of the greatest tasks that we have in the field right now, because women are illiterate. Access of water, it's very hard, and since they don't have that knowledge, technical knowledge, we know that women hardly complete basic education. Then getting into these more complex issues, it's becoming every time harder. But it's a work that we have to do, and we have to work within different kinds of NGOs, agencies, stakeholders, in order to be able to
Thank you so much for this question. Okay, here, there goes. And I'll collect all this last question, and then we'll come back again to the plan. Yeah.
J'interviens.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
Merci. Merci, je me suis présentée tout à l'heure, je suis Madame Bayazitoun, je viens d'Algérie. Donc je disais que j'étais agronome, je suis docteur en agronomie. Alors je voudrais revenir sur 2 points. Quelqu'un a dit tout à l'heure, à juste titre, que pour que la question de l'intégration de l'approche genre dans les politiques, que ce soit de la météo, que ce soit de la climatologie, que ce soit de l'agriculture, quel que soit le domaine, il faudrait que les femmes elles-mêmes puissent être au cœur même de l'élaboration de ces politiques. Alors, je pense que à l'issue de notre rencontre, il serait utile et intéressant peut-être de mettre dans les recommandations que les Nations Unies, toutes les agences concernées, peuvent continuer d'interpeller les États, voire faire pression sur les États pour que les femmes soient effectivement au cœur de l'élaboration des politiques, notamment celles concernant le sujet qui nous réunit aujourd'hui. Deuxième point sur lequel je voudrais intervenir, c'est la question, comme ça a été soulevé tout à l'heure, de la discipline de la météorologie qui n'attire pas les jeunes filles. Alors, je pense qu'il y a lieu d'envisager de manière urgente, je dirais, la valorisation de ce métier. Alors, outre ce qui peut se faire peut-être dans les universités en matière de sensibilisation, de plaidoyer auprès des jeunes étudiants, pour les orienter étudiantes vers la filière, il y a peut-être d'autres façons de valoriser ce métier. Peut-être qu'il s'agit là de trouver le moyen. Et la question reste posée.
Thank you. I'll ask all the panelists to start maybe from your side first, and then if you want to pick up one question. Yeah.
Okay, I won't be able to answer all the questions. I leave my other colleagues to address the rest of the questions. But yeah, I'd like to connect with one point that was raised regarding the question of cultural issues. What recommendations can we put forward with regards to trying to transform girls and women are embedded in, so that they would actually join and enroll themselves in the sciences or science-related disciplines? Well, I think this question addresses itself to a lot of different levels. First, of course, is the overall institutional level that I think should by itself be transformed and work towards an environment that is much more conducive to change and much more, if you like, conscious of the need for gender parity and gender equality. And some of this I have mentioned in my presentation. It is, of course, efforts to organize, let's say, women who are in these disciplines, to be able to mentor them, to be able to constantly provide opportunities for self-reflection as they hone and they sharpen their skills in the sciences that they are part of, constantly aware of the power relations within these fields, and they are able, therefore, to address the need to transform these power relations within these fields. Exposure to gender-friendly environments as well could help in this respect. And ultimately, it is a personal task and a personal decision. It is, I think, a kind of interface between the personal and, if you like, the professional, where we find that there are power relations in every facet of our life. And constant consciousness of these power relations increases the awareness of women of the fact that unequal environments need to be transformed. It's not an easy task, and perhaps our starting point is to ask ourselves right now, what am I doing in such a forum on gender and climate services? What prompted me to come and attend 3 days from my time to be here and learn about gender and bring home messages about gender? So ultimately, change is personal, and change as well is institutional. Thank you.
Does it work? Yeah. Let me just also pick one question to react to, and that's the question about how to engage with women in the fields in irrigation system in the Andean countries. It happens to be, I have worked there in Andean countries too, so I know a little bit about that. And I think you're very right. So I think your point is very well taken. You can only start doing things once you appreciate how people themselves divide labors and rights and powers and how they perceive the work that they do. But in that sense, the Andean countries are also very interesting. Because if you really probe, then the categorization of what is male labor and what is female labor and whether or not men or women do irrigation is a really interesting question, and it depends very much on how you define irrigation. So if you probe deeper, then actually you'll find that you could not do irrigated agriculture without the labor of women. Only, what tasks will you include in your definition of irrigation and which ones will you not include? And that is precisely the topic I wanted to raise. Often, the very definitions of the important works are already colored in a masculine way to make them seem more important. So actually, while doing this work, we also need to be very careful of our own definitions and valuations, the same way as you mentioned the difference between easy and complex technologies. What makes them easy and what makes them complex, and who says so? So there already you introduce a new hierarchy, and I think it's part of us as people who are committed to making a change in terms of having more gender equity, to be very critical of these hierarchical valuations that always have gender dimensions.
Thanks, Margaret. Kusum, could you just take on these two questions, one on the attitude part, and I think I'll club the other question, last question, also on the how do we actually make the job more valuable?
If I may I answer the gentleman who has now left?
Okay, the policy part, fine. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I can give you.
Yeah, the gentleman has ignited the question and left the room, but I think still it is an issue that we should look at. He said that, who makes policy? Politicians make policy, and what makes politicians run? It is the voters, and it is the funds. So I think that it is, if you look at the year 2000 in the Hague Forum, one of the most critical, important decisions which came out of that was the need for accessing political decision makers. And this is something that we come across all the time, because however well we plan our work, we present our work, the politicians are the final decision maker. So as in the case of Koslanda, perhaps, if we can, I often ask myself, have we lost the convincing power that we have not got these policies through? Because obviously there's a crying need, but if it hasn't happened, is it that the fault is in ourselves, that we have lacked the powers of conviction? I think that about the community, the feeling that the community does not have the skills to work on certain issues, the community science that I mentioned. In Sri Lanka, 1/6 of the community water, rural water, is run by communities which are volunteer organizations led by volunteers. None of them have a degree in water science, but they are doing the work, and in some cases where we have this major issue called chronic kidney disease, we are setting up reverse osmosis systems, and those RO systems themselves are being led by community people. Many of them are women. So I think that, we should not underestimate their willingness, their courage, their ability to come up to these positions of leadership. Now, we have a program called Jalavahini where we train women CBO officers. And from that, we have started up a program called Climate Smart Agriculture. Perhaps it is that we should, as much as we invest in universities and academia, we should also invest in empowering communities so that they can take on challenges.
Thanks, Kusum. I'll give it to Vasila to answer the last question, and then we'll soon break out into groups, actually. Yeah.
Repeat the last question. Repeat, please, the last question. So the last question was how to change attitudes. It is a very difficult question. It has two sides. On the one hand, there is the preparedness of women to challenge high-level, mid-level, low-level posts, it means that they should have the knowledge and the attitude of professionals. And I'm not sure that in different countries there are all the necessary framework to prepare these women for the challenge. So it is to women organizations of the country to demand to high-level international organizations to organize training, enough training, so they will be completely prepared to take the leadership position. It could be high, it could be medium, it could be low level, but they will be ready for do this. On the other hand, it is maybe, again, but in this, women should be inspired, should be insisting, should be very, how to say, present in their demand. On the other hand, again, the ball is in the field of high-level international organization to make this necessary for this training. So this is maybe something which we'll discuss largely in the next 10-15 minutes, but to introduce quota for men and women, to introduce more scholarship for women. Many things could be done, and we are waiting for our little groups, 5 groups, which we are going to prepare now, to find together the decision. Everybody can have its own opinion, and we are waiting to hear it.
Okay, thanks, Vasila. Now we'll break out in groups actually, and before that, I would request all the interpreters. So thank you so much for your help, and I guess your time is there for leave. So thank you so much. What we will do is that there are 5 groups. Can we have the questions, please? And each group is led by one of each of the resource person. We have 5 major questions, and I would request you to choose the question and probably tie yourself with the facilitator here. The first question related policy be increased. This is going to be led by Bebete. So if you are interested to answer these questions, please come this side. Second question is going to be led by me. Which institutions should be active players in promoting women's participation in water science and policy? The third question is, how can we increase the number of women involved in weather and climate related capacity building and in design and operation of water supply systems? This is going to be led by Kusum. The fourth one will be led by Margaret, which is on how can the concerned scientific communities create an enabling environment to increase the number of women, especially at senior levels, so as to contribute more to the gender equity, gendered water policy making. And the fifth question is going to be led by Vasila. What steps are needed to promote and support young women in national meteorological and hydrological services? I know this is the end of the day, but I think this discussion in a closed group is going to be much more interesting. I request all of you to please come. We will hold the placard here, so wherever you want to come, please come, and then we have about half an hour to discuss and come back to the plenary. Yeah. Okay, we can just stand here. Please come. And you can leave your stuff here and we can go back to the plenary.